Welcome to Cryptozoology show, and this episode, a continuation of the Loch Ness Monster-like phenomena, part three, the Russian lake monsters, from goddesses like this cutie pie here, this beautiful Siberian lady here. Um, to beasts that attack boaters. We're going to cover some Chernobyl monsters and all kinds of weird stuff. Giant snakes in the lakes and seal like creatures and some other sort of ones here. And definitely Russia, out of any of them, has much more going for it than a lot of the other ones out there, sort of thing. And it's very interesting. It's There's actually some very good credible films that perfectly show that yes, there is odd anomalies out there of very large creatures that shouldn't be actually in a lake of these sort of sizes and things like that. And some of these lakes are astonishingly huge. And I mean, some of them are like 5 times the size of Ness and stuff like this, and much even deeper depths and things like that, and have not been touched by humanity as much and that sort of thing, right? So there's a lot about Russian lake monsters that are different from the other ones. A lot more scientific people have actually ran across these and sort of picked up sonar readings. Divers have seen them and all kinds of things like this. And it's quite actually, I'm only covering a small section of them. There's way more than what I cover in here. And I cover some in the book too, of personal people that have contacted me and things like that that were from Russia and things like that. It gave me some links and different ones that you won't find in others. And I just comment on them because they were interesting sort of stories, right? And this sort of thing. So, but for now, we're going to cover some of the sort of basic ones here and all kinds of bizarre sort of stories that will boggle one's mind. I'll tell you. I mean, Russia's really got some extremely strange sorts of creatures that are floating around in it. We'll cover from the Brosno beast, all kinds of them here, where they have a much longer record than Ness. That just a little update there on the Irish show. I had said on one of them the 6th century, and actually the reason I said that though is I don't conclude the River Ness sighting as an actual sighting of the Loch Ness monster because it's in the river. It doesn't necessarily mean the creature went into the loch at all, and it's a river monster, right? There's all kinds of reports of river monsters and things like that. So I don't conclude that as an actual sighting of the Loch Ness monster. It's not until really about the 1800s that you start seeing these things again, right? So I mean, like I said, the Loch Ness monster is really more of a newer phenomena compared to a lot of these other ones across the world that sort of, have a much longer sort of length of span to them and sort of like that. But it's a long history, and I mean, certainly has validity. Like I showed you that there is some anomalies in that the loch that is bizarre, that doesn't fit the regular sort of things that we can use as explanations that it's a big pike or things like that. Right? So here we'll go on here. Now, besides the land of hotties and the mighty Vladimir Putin there, and he likes to fish and besides that, these lakes have a giant fish in them, from Amur pike to all kinds of giant sort of ones of different species that cover across it that are just astonishing. Some of them that belong nowhere other places, and you won't find them pretty well except in these Russian regions and things like that. So we'll cover some of that more later. But here I had forgotten in the other episode there, by accident, I said that this was a mermaid. This was the creature that I was talking about that kind of reminds me of a clan guy. There you can see the top like thing sort of thing on it, so kind of amusing. But this is an actual real sort of a 1800s here, and these guys sort of speared. What happened is that as they were trawling, bringing this sort of thing up, these mermaids started spearing it. And you can see all these bizarre spears all through it and stuff like that. And these mermaids were fighting with this creature, I guess, trying to eat him or whatever they were going to do with him, right? A sort of idea like that. So absolutely fascinating. But whatever this species was, he's sort of like a rayish to possibly some kind of strange shark. It is possible. Some sharks do look rayish like, and so it is feasible that it was one of them as well. But whatever it was absolutely fascinating. You can see here where the mouth was and the sort of stuff like that. So I'm pretty convinced it's some sort of ray to sharkish relative species. It could even be one known because the photograph might have been a bit blurry or whatever and stuff like that. There is a few that look similar to this a little bit, so it's hard to know, but 100% identify, but it likely just as much could be an unknown species, which wouldn't be surprising in the slightest, right? I mean, scientists, like I said, they try to pretend like as if they know everything all around in their bodies of water and these sorts of stuff, but new things every year. Sometimes, some years there's been up to like 10, 15,000 new sort of species discovered. I mean, this is a ridiculous premise on their part. And when they talk to you like this on these shows and stuff, to any person that's actually educated about how the massive thousands of recorded sightings for thousands of years by a host of everybody from famous sort of people to scientists and all kinds of stuff, and to discount all that and credible films and everything else just because this guy hasn't visited the place and stayed there any length of time and he feels more comfortable in that world, they're always going to give you these silly answers. But the reality is like I mentioned, in the 1960s as a little boy, when first going into school and things like that, I already started doing projects on this, believing from this sighting of a fellow at Yellowstone Lake, the ranger, saying that there was a seal in it and these kinds of stuff. I started looking around at all kinds of other species that were saltwater, from sharks to all kinds of stuff, and started believing that it'd be possible that some of them just can traverse underground caving system, river systems, because I started noticing that all these major rivers also had reports of sea-like monsters to giant fish to all kinds of stuff. So although all kinds of other cryptozoological people always will state, no, it's a plesiosaur, or it's this, or it's that, or it's a seal, or it's a wave, or it's a log, or whatever it is that they're claiming, they're all completely not. The reality is that it's all kinds of things and not one is the answer. And this is a fact. I mean, absolutely, beyond a shadow of a doubt. And there is some things out there that we don't understand, and we're going to see some of these things here coming up. So first we'll start off here with Lake Baikal, Russia. Now this 32,000 square miles of surface area and home to one of the world's only year-round pure freshwater seal populations that's known. However, like I said, in Canada there's hundreds of lakes where these mentions and river systems, United States and worldwide, where people clearly have photographed, seen, witnessed, captured, police records, even in New York, the Hudson, East River, all kinds of ones. So, yeah, a list is endless of these kinds of things. And how any scientist can sort of argue with this, I find you're just lacking knowledge on the subject, and you shouldn't be preaching these things because you're incorrect. It's very simple. And they don't only live in Baikal, they visit all kinds of water systems, they go up them, and they traverse also probably through underwater caving systems as well, wouldn't be surprised. And this is how a lot of these creatures are getting in. And this is why some years you have lower reports than others. It may be that not many of them actually have a trap creature. The creature is a particular ones that are some kind of unknown cryptid, some of them. Some of them are seals, some of them are all kinds of things, from walrus to all kinds of different ones, manatees, you name it. A lot of different things are happening here. And these creatures, except in giant bodies of water like this, and even though they can get in this way too, I would suspect that they would have no problem living like easier because of just the giant size, the depths, and all kinds of fish. Now, they claim there's only about 60 some species of fish. I find this ludicrous, and I wouldn't be surprised there is massive hundreds of species in there that is not discovered yet. So, my belief that there's only 60 some species and there is so below zero that you couldn't even possibly like even in the Ottawa River here, after massive years of netting, I have over 30 species of fish that have been recorded there that is not listed in any sort of official publications on the Ottawa River, just to give you an idea. And I don't claim to have found them all by any means. I wouldn't be surprised there's dozens more, maybe even more than that. So people, the scientific community, fishermen, everybody, doesn't matter. You can be on a body of water for 50 years and never see a damn thing, but it doesn't mean that there isn't something in there. And this is the thing is that these creatures can and do all the time many sorts, from giant eel-like things to unknowns to science occasionally. Most of them is not this, though. A vast majority, like we'll cover in the books, are all kinds of known species that we know of. And I can even show you how they traverse up into these bodies of water and get in there, and they correlate with the sightings of what people see. So we'll eliminate a vast majority of lake monster lakes, but there is some, including some we're going to cover here, that definitely, and this Lake Baikal has a dragon in it, and this thing has giant scales on it. He looks like a dragon, big dragon head, and a ferocious giant sort of thing. They're petrified of it, any people that have rarely ever seen it, but it's rarely ever seen because of the size of the body of water is so slim that you're going to be there. Like, I mean, there couldn't be 10 million of these dragons. Oh, that's some other things I wanted to mention before. We'll get on to some other things here soon, but I didn't explain that very well in the other sort of things. There's much more beautiful documentaries filmed than what I could do, right? Because I don't have this sort of equipment for this, and I'm not on the body of water right that moment, and that sort of thing, to do the documentary properly. But the thing is the reason why I'm saying to you is that all of them so far that I've ever seen since a little kid, all of them are suggesting silly things that very few times is the actual answer to it, as well as that the bizarre belief that the Lochness monster is only one monster swimming around it. This is ludicrous sort of stuff here, right? And I don't know where this stuff came from, where the imagination of these people, and how people are not being educated properly about our water systems and what's really going on, including science. They talk foolish, saying every time it's a wave, and this, when I'll show you a bunch here that is not a wave, it's a living creature, and definitely is too large to be any of the known species. They can't be otters. They're not a sturgeon. They're not except that a few that I showed that are giant eels, but in a vast majority of them, they're not giant eels. They're not sort of a plesiosaur either. I haven't seen one exactly that matches to that sort of thing. And many, but they are still unknown sort of large creatures that shouldn't be in there, and seemingly unknown to science because they don't match any of the ones that we know of, and certainly not ones living in a lake anyways. So this is the thing is that even this Lake Baikal has mermaids spotted and stuff like that. So I'm not going to. Some people have had beautiful films and all kinds of stuff, and I know lots of people have their scientific this and that and all kinds of things going. However, they're not knowledgeable about the historic backgrounds of these things. They're ignoring factual things, and they just want to stand on a certain point of the fence because, I mean, you have a skeptics magazine or this or that. You have to always look like as if everything must be, but where did the skepticism come from in the first place? when actually we get this from early monster films where people's the you see the imagination of the King Kong and the this and that, and then when thrown in with lake monsters, everybody presumes that somehow the great scientist guy must have been there ages ago. He must have netted everything. He must have caught everything. He must have swam down. 99.99999% of all the lakes worldwide have never even been barely explored, let alone fully. Right? So, I mean, these things are ridiculous premises that are pitched by people that have not actually been out on these things. And even when they do, they don't have the proper equipment to do such a thing. You're telling me you're going to be able to land a 50-foot sort of prehistoric monster of some sort that can bite through your nets or crush this or that? Let's say that it actually exists, right? In some of them, these kinds of things, you're not going to be able to do that, and it's not feasible, and you wouldn't run across it likely anyways, because still, even in any big body of water, let's say it's 6 miles long, right, and I don't know, 500 feet deep, okay, and it's 2 miles wide. You're only a little blob of divers in a little group here, right? And now you're in this one little spot. I mean, the odds of him coming by at that moment when you're in the water for only an hour or two or whatever it is, right? A few hours, these sorts of things. I mean, this is a stupid sort of premise, right? And then the other thing is that even with sonars, quite often, I mean, who's to know, especially if they're giant eels and some of them, easily they might burrow themselves in the mud in the daytimes or go into caves or crevices and things like that and rest in there, so your sonar is not going to pick it up, and very few people are out at night doing sonar readings and things like that, and a whole host of other reasons why you're not finding the proper information to correlate to 100% prove that yes, these sort of things exist out there. But the wave explanation to the Joe Nichols logs and all the other ones are very, very small portion of what's really going on. And any scientist that claims that there isn't sort of unknown animals in some of our lakes, they just laugh. I mean, seriously, because this is my personal self have seen things that I know was not any fish that I can say that would be possible. It wasn't, they weren't sharks, they weren't sturgeon, they weren't wayward seals, they weren't any of these kinds of things. They were bizarre sort of anomalies that shouldn't have been sort of in there. Ogopogo and a few other sightings of bizarre sort of things that I cover in the book and things like that, where that even proved to me that yes, no, I can't, none of these creatures are matching up with anything. And I have to be fair. I go down the list. I'd be glad if I couldn't care less if it's a minke whale, it could be a lost dugong. It wouldn't matter that this is now an explanation. I'm happy with that. That's good. If it's real, but I'm not going to start lying and sort of just to do this, like just to give an explanation and claim everything's a log when I know it can't be, right? So I think these things are ridiculous, and please educate your fellow that it's not. You're not retarded just because you believe that possibly there could be unknown anomalies in lakes, and that it's actually very common sense to it, and it does occur, and whether people like it or not. And so scientists just needs to learn this. I like I said, I've known this since a little kid, and even in the 1800s since then, I found newspaper articles where the guy even is saying the same thing pretty well as me, and this dude's thinking the same thing in the 1800s. He said, some be it of giant fish. He said, some are of great eels. He said, some are of huge snakes. He says, some are of seals, and like this, and he actually mentions what he believed all the sort of the Loch Ness monster was, and a few other ones there were similar, where the guys giving the same kinds of things, because these people were even correct then, and it was, I'm not even the first one to think of this, and there's been ones and that sort of stuff, except that I found a lot more proof now in modern times where I can back this sort of stuff up with films, divers going down and finding underwater caverns, proving that they probably do lead to possibly the ocean, and then it makes all sense then. I mean, you just have a small amount of unknown animals that traverse worldwide into different sort of underground caving systems. They go into these sort of lakes. They may use them for mating. They may use them for some kind of feed at certain times of year. Maybe whatever it is, right? There could be a multitudes of reasons why that they would do such things, right? And so I mean, and this Lake Baikal, I mean, is so little explored. I mean, there was even divers that went down there and said they had a battle with some kind of alien. There's some sort of miniature, sort of like weird alien sort of guys that are almost like alien grays and stuff like this. And these things were around them, and some kind of weird mermaid like sort of creatures, right, of some sort. So absolutely fascinating. So there's a lot of strange things out there that we don't know of yet, and for sure I'll show you some here coming up that'll sort of boggle your mind, right? So Lake Brosno, this lake located in the Tver region in Russia, has a depth of near 150 feet and is loaded with the dead wood and gas boil up. Now there is that sort of phenomena to it. However, there's all kinds of things where animals and stuff have disappeared on the sides of the shore, and also some credible sort of witnesses, including even the Mongol army turned around from it because they saw the creature, right? And the locals do see and say it's got scales and dragon-like and that sort of thing like that. So it's an interesting lake. Now, I believe probably sometimes this could be an answer that the odd log is floating up and stuff like that. But some of them, where the things are attaching creatures on shore and these kinds of stuff like that, that's a bit out there to make such a claim. And considering even the Mongol army mentions it in their records, it has too long of a history just all blame it on a piece of wood, right? So I would say there's probably something to that particular one, but not enough evidence one way or the other yet to sort of be 100% sure. But Eglinton Lake, this interesting cryptid lake has depths of over 500 feet and over 46 miles long, makes it more likely candidate for a monster. The lake may have been formed by a meteor, possibly a volcano, and is perfectly round. Nearly reports go back ages. Description like a typical Lochness like beast, with sort of the long neck and flippers and stuff like that, or sometimes a great snake like sort of thing. Lake Say Dozero, said to be located at the Kola Peninsula, has reports of lake monsters and Alma type beasts being seen along its shores, and a giant beast that rises from time to time out in the center of the lake. So, of course, that's where they always come out, right? Sort of thing, right? Here. Lake Kairin in the Yucatan Peninsula has tales of strange things in the lake, although small lake reports persist, so interesting in another one here. But one witness in the 60s saw a huge snake-like beast in the lake. Lake Vats also giant snake reports, and many others there, including one amazing film that you can find on YouTube that I know is not known species and seems to be like the odds of it being fake is pretty slim. So my conclusion is at least some of these lakes probably do have some things to them, but we'll cover some where there actually is some good sort of evidence for them, and we'll go to them next. Here, Russian lake monsters are interesting for numerous reasons. Not only are they consistent over hundreds of years, but often have been witnessed by Russian scientists, which makes them more plausible. Also, not all monsters, just like in other countries, are some Loch Ness types, and often are described as giant fish. Here is a list of more credible lake monsters and some that we're going to cover here. Siberia's Lake Lebinker. This lake has a huge sonar blimps indicating a creature of immense size and not a school of fish. You can see it down here. I mean, absolutely astonishing. Now, this photo here was claimed to be in Lake Lebinker, but I found out later it isn't, and I was dubious about that because that's the problem is sometimes people will post these things again and switch the lake and not have the correct information. But that sonar reading is from Lake Lebinker. It was taken by a scientific group and that sort of thing. Very interesting, but we'll cover that particular picture here on the left later, sort of thing like that. But it's a very interesting sort of lake, and it has a lot of credibility to it. There was even people that lived along its shores, and the government actually sort of got them to sort of leave. And also another case of a sort of similar like thing where the locals just all abandoned it because they said that this monster comes up and sort of attacks them right at their boats, or children missing and these kinds of things. So here he is, an actual real sort of film of it that definitely is not any sort of fish. It's not anything I can think of, and it's too huge to be sort of any known sort of thing. So it's very convincing. Here, the Lake Lebinker monster. Here, a frame of a video shot at Lebinker shows that, yes, living large anomalies are in the lake and has by far greater credibility than most lake monster lakes. So before we cover this film, we'll look at a few other pieces of evidence here too as we're going along. But you can see here a part of his back, and it comes up on that. There's no disturbance anywhere, and when you watch the film, you can clearly see this creature's alive, and it's not a log or any other ridiculous sort of thing that you're going to claim, right? So now here he comes up more. Look at the length of this thing, okay? Now, that's absolutely fascinating. I mean, look at the size of him compared to those trees in the background there. So much more of his body's coming up on that sort of thing like that. And I find this sort of extremely credible sort of a piece of footage. I've watched it many times and froze the frames, and you can see him doing all kinds of different stuff. And he's definitely one solid sort of thing. He's absolutely Titanic size, way bigger than anything should be in a freshwater sort of lake like this. And definitely, it's right up there. I would give this with another credible film of, like I showed you over in Serbia, and some, and also there's one in Lake Michigan, and a few others out there that are these giant eelish like looking sort of to a certain degree. However, this creature is different, and maybe some sort of air breather as well because of this feature here next. Now here you actually see him blow, he snorts out a bunch of water and air out of his nostrils. Now look at the length of that, and he's still bent. I mean, absolutely astonishing sort of thing. And I mean, that is a very, very good, credible film, and very interesting. And it's certainly not a fish. It's not a goose. It's not a swan. It's not, your ancestor. It's not any of these things. It's not a diver. It's not anything. This is a real sort of large, one solid creature. You can actually see here, and he's very eel-like, except that he's blowing this sort of, air and stuff like more like a whale would do sort of thing. So very interesting, extremely intriguing. I find this one very, very sort of an interesting, incredible sort of interesting sort of a piece of film. But now here's this one here is also claimed. Now this is really bizarre. There's another film that's very similar where you'd swear to God you're looking at the same similar creature, where they're claiming it's in Seneca Lake, and I went there and investigated that lake, fished on it, and things like that. I never saw any giant snake monster, but I did collect giant snake-like stories. But this particular film here, I still cannot 100% verify whether this is Lebinker or whatever Russian lake that it is. And then also there's one very similar in the Seneca Lake, where it's a separate video, but they're very similar, and it's fascinating. But anyways, we'll cover here what is got to be the most interesting sort of lake monster I've ever seen, and he really matches the ancient description of these great orms and sort of the more, the Scandinavian sort of tales there with the giant sort of a weird giraffe-like heads and all these kinds of things were the more older accounts that you would get. And in this lake, this dude's still alive. So, this all I can tell you is I can't guarantee you it's Libinker, but wherever it was, this guy Dante had filmed it. I think it was in about 2013 or something, and still can't 100% verify what lake this was filmed on, but it's not fake and it's fascinating. So maybe the guy's protecting and doesn't want to tell people. I have no idea. Whatever the reason, all I can tell you is it's not a CGI thing. And it's absolutely fascinating. So let's cover some more. So now you can see, I don't know if you can see in the right there, but you can see a tip of the island. And look at the great big length of this so you can start seeing more of his back here, okay? So this is not too exciting yet. You could say, oh yeah, that must have been a log floating by or whatever, right? So, but we'll keep going. So now you start seeing a portion of his back comes up, and you can see now that island that you were seeing in the previous shots. So the creature's swimming towards the island, and he seems to be fishing of some sort or looking for some kind of food. Okay, so now here's where it starts to get extremely interesting. Okay, now look at this. This is exactly like the muck shalash there. Exactly what I showed you in that film over from Scotland. Okay, the creature is extremely similar. So this could be even the same species, but just in another sort of like, let's say they're an ocean-dwelling great worm of some sort, some kind of weird thing. And somehow they go into different of these colder-like lakes around, and Ireland, Scotland, all these European countries aren't massively far away from each other, and the same oceans and things and all this stuff here is hitting all around it in the river systems and all these kinds of stuff. It would be quite feasible that the creature has a certain range and that they could be visiting many of these lakes where you got these similar like sort of things, or that they got trapped in there. Whatever the case, or both scenarios exist, right? It doesn't matter. The point is that this creature is very similar to the Muck Shalesh one. In a lot of ways, and we'll show this. But now here, what's better than the Muck Shalesh one is that this one here now, his head comes out. Way better. Now look at this thing. Okay, so when you can actually see he has two ears on him. Okay, and he's got these two pointed ears, and in old ones from Manipogo to different ones like this was a fairly consistent sort of sighting. And a lot of the older BC lakes too, and some of the ones from western United States and things like that, where they describe these pointy sort of ears on them, and also in a few Quebec ones as well in some other areas. And so again, what if this is some kind of, a worldwide sort of rare snake-like sort of worm creature of some sort that does this as their habit. They live possibly in the ocean most of the time and visit through underground systems or up through a river. I mean, it'd be very easy for even a creature like this to wiggle his way up some even shallower river. At nighttime, they'd probably do these sorts of things, or go underwater caverns and that sort of thing. So, but now here he starts getting way better and way better every second here. Okay, so now his neck starts coming out more, and he changes his position of his head. This isn't some guy towing some fake rubber monster. It's the ear positions and everything actually change in some of the sort of frames. It's not feasible. And this thing is gigantic. And also the guy even covers, I don't show this, but he covers way to the right and to the left. He's looking around because the creature went down for a second and he couldn't find it. And luckily he did this. It actually covers mass distance that way and that way, proving there's no boats or anything else around there to sort of be able to pull off this sort of stunt, right? Okay, so now you got this. Now here he changes position again slightly. It's very similar frame. It's just a few down. Okay, but now here's where it starts to get extremely interesting. Okay. Now you can see him here, and his position of his head is different, and his ears again, right? And he's got this ripple sort of stuff going down his neck and below a little bit, where he actually changes the shape from in another one. You don't see that rippling on there, and there's little bends that wasn't in the first part. So that's extraordinarily convincing because you now would have to have a rubber monster that can actually pop his fins in and out and do weird sort of extra little stuff. I mean, it seems a lot for no money and no advertising or no anything. It's a bit out there, right? It's just right. So I mean, extremely convincing, and this is the kind where it's a real sea like lake monster, not a fish. It's not a seal. It's not any of the odd ones that, yes, science still argues this occurs, but it really does. And quite frequently, like I said, that literally hundreds of mass rivers across North America have seals go up them, and other sorts of stuff from porpoise to dugongs, manatees. It doesn't matter. All have been from time to time found in these sorts of things, right? So besides that, also unknown creatures to science, and this is definitely one of them. And so I'm a gigantic fan of this film. It's absolutely spectacular. I mean, so all I can tell you is go check this out. Whether or not it really is Lake Labinker, if somebody could finally verify this, it would be nice to know. This Dante guy or whoever, I've never been able to speak to him, but uh, the point is that whoever, how he got this and all this sort of stuff like that, it's highly credible. It's alive. You can see it under the water. It does all kinds of swimming motions. There's all kinds of frames that have been shown here. If you clearly watch it, yeah, it's a bit blurry and it's an older camera of some sort and it's far away, but it does all what it needs to do to clearly state that. And in fact, there's one part where he turns his head another way, which I didn't show, and he comes out and you actually see him doing jerking motions as he's coming along and stuff. It's absolutely a very credible, sort of interesting film. And this thing is gigantic. I mean, he's absolutely huge. You can see on the island, the guy shows the island over in their structure over there and all kinds of stuff. It's very large. So whatever this thing was had to be very, very big. Like, you know, it couldn't imagine anything less than 20 feet long, sort of idea, right? So whatever, 20 to double that amount, because you never see them fully enough to ascertain. Plus, even when you do under the water, you can't compare this to this island because you'd have to do measurements there and everything like that. But it looks fairly large, and it looks like a human be standing on that rock, and the rock would be at least one third of a human's height, bare minimum, sort of idea, maybe even a bit higher. So I would suspect that this thing is fairly big, like from the far distance it is and everything else and all that sort of stuff. Plus, when he's under the water, he's in big wiggles, so he isn't pulled out straight, right? So definitely he's not an oarfish. He's not an eel. His face is like pipe shaped, like a giant seahorse's would be. And you get these ancient tales all through Ireland to every other sort of European country and Canada and United States of this sort, right? So it could very well be that we have a visitor that visits certain sorts of lakes or got trapped in them that all evolved similar, where they're this great sort of worm like horse ish strange sort of creature. But anyways, I wouldn't swim in that lake if you paid me a zillion bucks. I wouldn't even want to. I'd love to visit it, but I would be actually terrified to be in a boat in that thing. Myself personally, out of all the ones I've ever seen, this thing scares the shit right out of me. I mean, if you were in there and that thing was able, he would be easily able to wrap himself around you or the boat or something and drag you down into the depths. The only thing that doesn't scare me about him as much is that his beak is sort of thin, and he doesn't look like the type that would be able to eat very large creatures, but he certainly could wrap himself around you and maybe bite you. Who knows what kind of teeth he has or whatever, right? And I mean, or he could even be poisonous, as far as you know. Like I would never touch any of these unknown creatures until you could analyzed to know whether or not that this fish or anything doesn't have some kind of toxin on it or whatever, right? Because these things are known out there. So how do you know this unknown one that you find doesn't have some kind of weird protection mechanism besides all the normal things, right? So but all I can say is that the ears actually bend and twitch in different positions in a few of the frames and all kinds of stuff. The odds of this fake is extremely low. So I would say wherever this lake was, whether it was Labinka or not, that is extremely convincing that some kind of unknown giant worm-like anomaly lives in this lake, whatever it was, right? So absolutely fascinating. Now this one's even more convincing. It's what there's literally probably about a dozen people running around, all shooting different cameras at the same time, but mostly you only. Yeah, but I suspect there's people from behind because you hear hustling and you see people left and right. So I think from what I can remember, there might be like 6, 8 people you see in the screen, but I suspect there's a few more floating around. So I never fully counted them, but somewhere in this sort of range. And this, what you're going to see here is the most interesting sort of thing because all this time people have been rejecting, and like I showed you in the other film of over in Scotland and also in Serbia, that where the creature seems to be able to go up and down and side to side like an eel, and the argument's always been for ages, well, no, it can't be a giant eel because a lot of times it goes vertical and stuff like that. I'll show you a case right here where this creature does fully both of these and actually transforms his body shape and everything, and would explain in the same lake that you could get an eel monster sighting, a dolphin like sighting, and some other weird sort of thing all at the same time because the creature has this abilities to change their shape somewhat. So let's check out this one. Here's a river monster in Uzbekistan, okay? Now, here at first, when I first saw him, he's going up and down and he was flopping. He looked like he was injured. So I thought it was some kind of bizarre sort of whale species that, or dolphin possibly, that was, off course and that had strange anomalies to him, like his ridges were odd and things like that. But he was swimming very, very exactly much like what a dolphin or a porpoise would, or any of those sorts of ones, right? Or whale or this sort of thing. Except more pronounced, like much stronger sort of thing to it. So I found that sort of interesting, but then it gets really interesting. And I mean, these people were extremely close. This is one of the more closer water monster films you can ever find out there, where definitely it's not a creature knowing the science, and it's very strange. At first, I would have blamed it 100%. If I only had seen these little parts, I would have said it's a wayward dolphin to whale species of some sort, and that it's sort of a bit messed up, but it looked whale enough, and the way it's moving and everything. However, then it changes very quickly. So now you see it, and he starts to turn here, and you can see almost like what a sea whale or a minke whale, sorry, what would have had sort of like this sort of right up the top, that little ridge there, and you can see sort of the weird sort of stuff, and he's going definitely up and down, like so, that sort of movement on it. But this is where it gets really, really fascinating. And I mean, absolutely fascinating. Okay, so now he starts heading off to the darker spot, and his body starts to change. And then he starts swimming side to side, and you actually see him turn around and start heading more towards now where the people are filming. So he's actually changing his shape, now becoming more eel like, and stops doing this up and down sort of motion. So this proves 100% that at least this creature can do both of these things. And in a few other films, you see this of also creatures that don't match this one, but also have the same abilities. So all this time, maybe we're wrong here, where some of them actually can do both, right? And this sort of thing. And this is an interesting sort of thing to it. So now he comes and he starts swimming across, and he's heading now along the shore where everybody's swimming. Now look at the long eel-like sort of body to it. Now if you were just seeing it from these frames, you wouldn't think that's a whale at all. It doesn't look whale-like in the slightest. It looks more sort of like long eelish, snaky-like sort of thing to it, right? Absolutely, very interesting, and you can see him going along. Okay, now look at this. Okay, now he turns and now his head looks way smaller than before and he looks much thinner all along him. So he's actually changed his shape very well. And sort of now you're looking at him. If I was looking at that particular frame, it would look much more like a very large, giant eelish sort of creature of some sort, or a snake, or even possibly a gator of some sort, but the head's a bit weird, gatorish like there a little bit. But the point is you would relegate it in more to that thing. You wouldn't be thinking anymore that it's you know what I mean, a dugong or something. The bodies would be way wider and different, right? And this sort of thing like that. Yet this creature clearly proves on this film that he actually has the ability to change his shape like that quite quickly. And now look at this. Now you see him. Now he comes up and he's got these ridges all along, and he's going and doing sort of now more vertical again, sort of, and so it's extremely interesting, this creature. Anyways, he's quite huge because you can see him compared to the people that are running along the shoreline and that like that. So yeah, you know, he's beyond what should be again in a river like this, you know, sort of thing. And he doesn't match any sort of seals. He's not a shark. He doesn't even match the eel sort of thing at the beginning at all, right? So I don't even think he's a giant eel of any sort. If he is, he's some really strange one. But he could be some kind of bizarre, primitive, like whale like thing that, yeah, you know what I mean, has ability to change your shape a little bit, or some kind of unknown sort of snake-like sort of beast that can bloat up and thin itself down as required, or some kind of strange thing like that. But you can see how this thing completely can change its body shapes as it's going along and doing a lot of stuff. And let's say since this dude can do this, who's to say that these sightings from nests to all kinds of ones where some creatures are like this that are visiting these things, and this is why we get these different sort of things where one guy says it looks like a whale. Like when I saw the Okopogo, this thing looked like it was going up and down. It didn't look like it was going side to side. So that's why it was sort of suspicious. But the front head and also its head came out of the water a little bit. And eels don't typically, wouldn't like they're gonna sort of, except for that one I showed you in Serbia where he comes flying, sticks his neck way out of the water. He might have been chasing a fish and missed it or whatever, right? Some kind of scenario like that. He might do something like that. A giant eel might do such a thing, but in that particular sort of one, it's a bit weird where he doesn't. That what happened is he sort of, his head was up and it was at an angle and sort of like more positioned like a slightly different than what an eel should have been, or something like that. So whatever it was, I still have no idea, but it definitely didn't fit any of the sort of, couldn't have been a sturgeon or any of these kinds of things, right? So and the same thing is, maybe when I saw it that it's going up and down, maybe it can also go side to side too, right? And some of the reports do state that. So again, what if the same kind of like a family of these type of wormish kind of big sort of weirdos are out there? Let's say a small group of 5, 10, 20 different types exist that are variants, and they're worldwide, and they go up and through these caverns or river systems, and occasionally we see them, right? But most of the time we don't. But this could be one of the kinds out there, and definitely this is an unknown sort of animal, whatever it is. It's absolutely fascinating, right? So Very, very interesting, anyways, and one of the more credible films I can find worldwide of a true unknown sort of animal that I can't state was a snake. It wasn't this. It wasn't that. It doesn't fit any of the sort of stuff, right? But anyways, we'll go on to some more here. Um, Here, Lake Turgoik monster. Here, we'll show you some frames there in a bit. Here's a beautiful, it's a pretty sort of a lake there. It's 130 feet maximum depth, so not massively super deep, and roughly about 4 miles long, sort of, and that. But there was a recent film of it there that's quite interesting that is very snake-like and sort of like another one of these sort of either giant worm-like monsters to eelish dragon sort of great orbs of the past and these sort of things. So certainly some of these lakes have these particular kinds of them, and there's so many of them worldwide that there definitely has to be something to it, and too many good credible films, including this one here. So here you can see the frames out. Now, this guy was suspicious even. He started checking around to see if local divers were swimming out the lake. And it's definitely not divers. but anyways, at least the guy tried to sort of like check out all the different angles to see what it could have been. And any divers around the region all denied swimming out in that portion of the lake or any of that sort of stuff like that. So, very interesting. But this Mikhail Manirikov, he was kayaking out and he filmed the beast there. And you can clearly see there is nothing, it's no rib, it's just perfect. And then all of a sudden, this long, long snake like thin creature, very similar again to the Mukhshalesh one, and also the other one that I showed you. Okay. So now you can see here, I don't know if you can see that, but you can see these black two humps here, and they're very similar color and about the same thickness like you see in the other films. So I'm kind of sort of on the sort of thing here where I'm starting to more and more believe that for sure there is a species that is some what they described in the Scandinavian lakes in the past and Canada and all over of these great snakes that is like a snake-like creature. That's what they'd call them, serpent snakes. And because a lot more modern sightings are more plesiosaur or seal-like or different stuff, but some of them always have these sort of things, and some like only particularly this sort, right? And this is a particular one here where it's quite interesting, and it matches this Mukhshalesh and a few other ones around, right? So here you can see now two of its humps there, and it comes up, and they're hard to see, but then there's one way further off here, so you can tell this creature is quite long. It's in a straight row. It's not a school of fish or anything like that. He has loops that come along like you see in some of the other frames. And you notice when the creature's feeding, it seems like in some of the other films, the same thing, he makes like a loop. So maybe he goes down along the bottom and he's digging his head around. Like, how do you know? Like, I mean, he could eat some kind of freshwater shrimp of some sort or all kinds of weird stuff, like whatever it may be, right? Or dead material along the bottom, that kind of thing, right? Like, I mean, it could be all kinds of, one like that. But certainly matches the ancient descriptions of these kinds of stuff. And so all these ancient books that early Animalia books, when they were telling you these great serpents exist in these lakes and things like that, they were telling you the truth. Now, whatever they are, that's another question, right? Because they haven't been identified yet. But definitely, there's too many of these films worldwide with the same kind of a creature being seen in it that there has to be some validity to these sort of to a degree here. Now, here the Lake Ladoga monster, and also Lake Vizero, which is that one's 15 kilometers long and about 8 kilometers wide, and depths of over 150 feet. Okay, giant seals to manatee-like sightings, mermaid-like sightings. Lake Ladoga is over 120 miles long and depths of over 750 feet. So that's one pretty huge lake, right? Sort of thing like that. This one guy, Mr. Yargarov, saw a UFO land in the lake, and they started seeing these sort of weird mermaid, sort of like space alien little guys that were, between an alien gray and a sort of merman sort of monster, right? But now, further investigations, though, nobody ever found anything, a flying saucer in the lake. At least they didn't report that they did. But actual other people, though, after further investigation and later sort of people investigating around the region, they did find out that even people have photographs of seals that visit there all the time. And again, this is what I've said, right? And this is another more proof of this. And finally, that picture that was claimed to be in Lake Labinker actually seems to be from this Vizero and sorry, Ladoga there, and that's sort of these creatures. Seals are swimming up in both of these bodies of water like that, and the natives said, all of them, that they do see them from time to time, and that it's quite actually fairly common. So this is where maybe some of these Russian fishermen, they heard the tale of the UFO that landed, then they sort of saw seals from far off and imagined sort of the rest, like sort of, thought they were little space aliens sort of guys. So very interesting, but quite an interesting sort of a body of water, and it'd be much bigger than this and crystal clear and all that sort of stuff, right? Here, more lake monsters of many more types of lakes and rivers are reported across Russia and nearby countries. And interestingly, like in North America, many are sealed to dugong-like in description. Also, most of these lakes have some access to the ocean, as in North America, as well some same thing, like you'll get these bellowing reports of blowing air, snorting, and fur-covered face. I mean, it clearly shows that, these seals and other similar ones are, even possibly a stellar sea cow. Who knows? Yeah, right. Like these kinds of weird ones out there, any sort of pinniped-like creature or dugongish to occasionally whales and different ones are sort of going into these sorts of bodies of water and are definitely creating a lot of the sort of sightings out there, but not all of them. And here we're going to cover some more here that are very interesting too. Here, some border lake monster of many types and lakes and rivers are reported across Russia and nearby countries. Other strange sorts, from giant eel to worms, along with many pin varieties similar to what Champlain described in the 1600s. There's a few accounts of a few of the lakes of giant, sort of like this centipede-like sort of monster where he's got these weird sort of fins all on the side, and Champlain and a few others have described similar like accounts in their accounts stating the same sort of a creature here. This is fascinating. I don't know where one person claims this is from Sweden's Storgen, or however you pronounce it. I'm terrible at that. But Storge there, well, I'll call it that. Right. That sort of, and then others claim it's from Lake Baikal, and another guy claims it's from different ones. So I still haven't been able to verify what that is, but I find it fascinating and a very interesting sort of a creature, and very wormish, like in the tales that I told you from Ireland and some of the other lakes where they actually have these photographed or filmed and that match this giant white worm like phenomena, right? So here's some other lakes: Lake Verada, Lake Kantaskoya, Lake Tolotskoy, Lake Kuril, just to name a few of some of the ones that have these weird sort of worm-like monsters, and also seals and different sort of ones like that. So absolutely fascinating. There's some pretty sort of weird sort of lakes out there, and some of these are gigantic in depth. Like, I mean, there's some well over 1,000 feet and stuff like that. And I mean, just absolutely like and underground cavern systems, and some have like hundreds of rivers or dozens or 50 or like all kinds of variants of amounts of giant rivers that also go into the ocean eventually, or the Caspian Sea, or different ones, and sort of get up in these things. I argued with scientists for decades. I proposed this as a little kid that Wells catfish got into the Caspian Sea and the different ones and would get up and then be able to get into other big, large freshwater bodies of water. And as a little kid, I believed this. And now, as a scientist, different ones told me I was full of it. It couldn't occur. And now they proved this, that they can tolerate salt water, and they've been found in high concentrations of salt water, and they do exactly what I said that they did. Right? So I never got responses back from the ones that kept knocking me and stuff like that. So it was great retribution for me, and sort of things like that. And I cover all this sorts of stuff in the books and things like that to show that these guys, again, you're listening to people that really haven't been out of the water much. They just presume they know. They feel comfortable this way. They don't want to admit that they don't know everything. Nobody does that. That's what people are like, right? Sort of thing. So, I mean, they're better off with their theories in their labs, but I mean, the reality is that these ichthyologists and marine biologists, or any of them that are studying these sorts of phenomena, they don't have the background. They're not on the waters. They don't have the equipment for it. They're not financed for it. And these lakes were barely visited hundreds of years ago by some early scientists. The guy found it. He looked around the lake for 3 minutes. That doesn't mean that he saw a monster. You don't know what species are in there. But like I said, even in the Otter River, there's all kinds of scientists. In fact, even in the 80s, there was already starting to be bass tournaments on the Otter River. Yet, according to their records, there was no such thing as a largemouth bass. They never caught any in their nets until way in the 80s. Yet they had been netting since the 1800s there. So it just goes to show you, like, I mean, you can't even find a largemouth bass. I mean, so, you're telling me that great big worm thing couldn't bust through your net easy? And there has been scientists that even have claimed this, that found their nets all torn up and wondered what had occurred and didn't really have an explanation, right? And that sort of thing like that. So, I mean, there's no reason to be skeptical. These same things that you have thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of records for thousands of years of people telling you they're seeing great worms, to seal-like monsters, to different things in their bodies of water. And now we have many films out there that are very credible. They're not CGI stuff, and they're showing these sorts of things, that exactly what people stated, right? And the fact that they're now discovering that all kinds of lakes have underground caverns, which I've always pitched, and here now you're seeing these things that, yes, it's very feasible that they can get in through these sort of underground water systems. Just like I told you about the sharks going, what was it, about 1,500 miles from the nearest sort of ocean or anything inland, in the middle of a desert, and these killer sharks made it in a little pond. Right? So, I mean, any sort of creature could do the same, and these creatures may have been doing this since our continents all split up for thousands of years here, or millions, or whatever you want to claim. It doesn't matter. Nobody can prove this. I only go by historic records that they say there was a flood thousands of years ago. I prefer to believe my ancient ancestors for tens of zillions of references of them over some guy's theory based on a geological theory of what they think should have been the different layers and how old they would be. I mean, this is all assumptions, not fact, never will be fact, can't prove it. Right? But you can prove that thousands of your ancient relatives told you that there was monsters, because they're in all kinds of documents from thousands of years ago even, right? So that's much more correlates, because they're telling you, you got films of them, you got witnesses of today that are still seeing them, and they're all seeing the same thing as they told you thousands of years ago. So there's way more evidence for it that way than just some guy's theory that there couldn't be one. on in there. Right. So here's some more here that are quite interesting here. The Chernobyl mutant giant monsters there. Like, I mean, this is sort of at the Chernobyl dam there, okay, there was these divers that went down there, and this guy said that he saw eyeballs the size of his head pretty well. This sort of idea, right? And that could easily swallow him, like 15, 20 foot long, sort of these mutant giant monsters, right? And in old days in Russia, they did get up to 15 feet, so maybe under circumstances like that, maybe some of them do, yeah, even get even way bigger, right? And this sort of thing like that. So also this nuclear fallout may be the cause of some of these sort of bizarre water creatures that are mutated a bit and gotten bigger or different weird stuff like that, and also could be responsible for some of the sort of stuff. Now, this is the weirdest creature I have ever seen. Now, a lot of it makes me want to keep saying it's got to be a fake and stuff like that, but there's some very peculiar things that doesn't seem likely that could be the case. Now you can see the color of the mud of this. So this creature, whatever he is, he likes to sort of dig around in the sort of the mud and weird sort of stuff. But look at the teeth on that. When I first saw this, I said, this cat, like, I mean, it must be some kind of clay sort of thing with some funny teeth shoved in it or something for a joke. But you actually, in one of the positions, the eye ridge changes slightly, and the gill positioning on the side, you can actually see where the gills are. It's because the mud is covering over it and sort of stuff, and this fish is possibly sunning itself or some kind of evolutionary bizarre thing. Now, what this was this really some unknown species of fish? No wonder nobody'd ever catch that on their line. Can you imagine that? Your fishing line probably in the highest probability is going to cut every time. Right? Like, I mean, that looks pretty nasty sort of teeth here on it, or whatever the hell this thing was, right? But they go poke along it there, right? And as sort of thing like that. And they poke it, and you actually see in another sort of frame, you see him, he turns around and his gills change a little bit, and he flings around. So it's not likely you to get that again, like if it was a rubber toy or some kind of weird thing like that. It would be difficult to do that from what you see, and so. It could be some mutant sort of thing. There was even a deer they show, and some kind of deer like or some kind of caribou-ish look sort of thing. He's hard to tell. He could even be a moose. I don't know what it is. I can't see him well enough to, but somewhere in that sort of range, he's some sort of deer-like creature. He actually has no head, for crying out loud, and this thing's running around and alive. So there's some mutant ass crap that like this, and as Merlin predicted with the extra eyes and all this kind of stuff. So I have no idea if that is some unknown sort of giant weird fish monster that is unknown to science, that just happens to look like that is in this Chernobyl bath, that the Chernobyl didn't do it to it. Or is that some kind of mutated now other species of fish that now have grown teeth the size of King Kong here, and is very coelacanthy, ancient, creepy looking, right? And look at it, the eyes on him there, and you actually see a part of his nose actually change position a little bit too. So it's very strange. I don't know what to think of this. I mean, it could be a fake, that one, unlike some of the other films that I showed. But at the same token, it could be just as likely a real, because some parts of it seem pretty tricky to be able to sort of get away with that with a rubber sort of creature or something like that, because the positions change a little bit. And the speed that he goes when finally they wake him up with the stick, I wouldn't have even came near that close to that thing. I would have tried to sort of hook it with a big musky lure or something and stay far off, and then have somebody there with a gun, if just in case if this thing can walk on the land somehow and it starts coming towards you with its fins, well, then I'd blast the mother into Kingdom Come, right? And then we'd get them scientifically sort of, I'd feel bad because probably there wouldn't be many of these things around, whatever he is. But at the same token, I mean, I don't know, but it's one of these ones that It's just absolutely so bizarre that it's not feasible to sort of make a judgment one way or the other, sort of. But I would suspect that if it is a fraud, they really went through a lot of effort and must have replaced the creature with a different rubber one somewhere in the film, and now you do that and that and that, like different things to get it to work right, right? But I mean, whatever it was, it more I'm more on the fence. That at first looking at it, it looks the most phoniest thing in the world, but the more you sort of analyze it and seeing the fin structure and the different weird stuff like that, there could be, it actually could be real. So it could be some mutated sort of creature, fish of some sort that could you imagine Amur pike or muskies mutating in our canal here like that? That might be next, sort of like that. Holy mackerel, man! That'd be some vicious teeth there, boy. Sort of thing like that. But whatever that thing was, absolutely fascinating. So that's another problem down there. Besides these ancient lakes that are super deep and stuff like that that haven't been touched by pollution. Do you know a lot of these lakes now, because of tourists wanting to see monsters, they're actually the locals, they used to be able to drink out of them within less than this little bit of time and years because of recent sorts of news about some of these things. There's now garbage floating in the lake and stuff like this. Come on, people, stop this, for God's sakes. Every country in the world, what you should be doing if they're visiting remote natural lakes, no bottled water allowed of any sort, no plastics, none of this bullshit, all by glass. And you sort of, this way, if it falls in the lake, it's not going to pollute it, or some kind of other thing that can sort of break down that isn't going to cause this. The plastic's got to go worldwide. Enough of this. We had for literally over 100 years people delivering glass here, having a sort of pop bottle recycling and all that kind of stuff. You can go back to this method, immediately ban all plastic bottles, all plastic rings, any of this kinds of garbage like that, and you remove them, and no more. Because they're ending up in our deepest oceans or everywhere. There was a guy that was in the deepest trench in the friggin' planet, okay, our deepest spot that we know of in the oceans, okay, and the Marianas Trench there, and he actually found sunken sort of a plastic garbage down thousands of feet below. Okay, so I mean, come on, seriously, like, I mean, and that's way out in the middle of nowhere land, and this stuff is drifting there, right? So I mean, this is not good. We got to stop this stuff, or none of these creatures are going to be alive, or even if they are, they're certainly not going to be. They're going to start turning into things like that. Maybe they'll crawl up on land and start eating us next, right? So we got to stop, man. And but anyways, I think I've got covered here. There could have been, I could have done a lot more about this sort of a thing like that, and some of the suspects of the different seal varieties that live around there and the different things. But there's a lot of stuff I covered in the book and things like that, and different things that I don't want to go into 5 million sorts of stuff. And this is so next time we'll do some more of the other missing countries, everything from Germany killer catfish that eat your pets and children as they're swimming out in the lake, to all kinds of stuff like this that's pretty creepy out there. And then also some Chinese water monsters from the Asian Rim and this sort of thing like that. So stay tuned for these next shows there about this continuation on with the water monsters and that sort of thing like that. So hopefully I showed you at least anyway some interesting sort of things here, that definitely there is a few unknown sort of animals in our bodies of water out there, and also gigantic sort of fish and other sorts of visitors, from whales to different things, that are getting in there. And so next time somebody tells you it's all along, you can clearly see this isn't the case. And I mean, these things are sort of a foolish sort of skeptical answers given just to stop the public from asking questions. and to not admit that they're not familiar with everything around them. It's very simple, actually, right? Sort of thing like that. But anyways, hopefully you enjoyed this sort of smaller presentation about the Russian lake monsters there. And again, if you have any sightings, it's funny. I get a bunch in a row. Then I get. I've actually collected more just recently chatting with people than I have off of this. So if you know any relative or anybody that's told you a whopper of a story from a giant fish to anything, I'm totally interested in all these kinds of things. And I don't, like I said, here I can clearly, I've shown you that, yeah, there is real things out there and that it's not all a log. I'm also, though, if it's a log, it's going to be a log. I'm a street shooter. I tell you exactly what these things are and everything. And some people won't like this for their tourism, some of the lake monsters that I cover, where they're not going to be, they would probably like these sorts of answers. But these are the truthful things, and science needs to stop giving ridiculous sort of answers. You look foolish when you're talking on the screen like that and saying every time it's a log or it's a wave. I mean, you're yeah, yeah, you got to start educating yourself a little bit better because you're calling thousands and thousands and thousands of thousands of references and credible films of today to ancient accounts. Every time that it's a log is a ridiculous premise, right? So, so anyways, stay tuned to some more shows, and thanks for watching. I hope you have a great day.